You think ancient goddesses were just symbols of beauty and fertility. But here's the truth, the most powerful deities in ancient civilizations were female, and their stories have been systematically erased, diminished, or rewritten by patriarchal religions. These weren't passive figures, these were warrior queens, cosmic creators, rulers of life and death. Today we're diving into the forgotten goddesses who shaped ancient religion, and discovering why their worship was deliberately suppressed. From Asherah to Lilith to the divine feminine in early Christianity, this isn't just mythology, this is lost history. Let's start with Asherah, the mother goddess of the Canaanites who was worshipped alongside Yahweh in ancient Israel. Yes, you heard that right, the ancient Israelites worshipped a goddess as Yahweh's consort. Archaeological evidence shows that Asherah was venerated in the Temple of Solomon itself. Inscriptions found at Kuntlet Ajrud in the Sinai Desert read, Yahweh and his Asherah, proving that early Judaism was not monotheistic but included a divine feminine figure. Asherah was the queen of heaven, the mother of gods, the goddess of fertility and wisdom. Her symbols were trees, particularly the sacred Asherah pole that stood in temples and high places throughout ancient Israel. The Bible mentions Asherah poles over 40 times, always commanding their destruction. Kings who did evil in the sight of the Lord were those who allowed Asherah worship, kings who did right tore down her sacred groves. But here's what's significant, for hundreds of years, Israelite religion included goddess worship. It wasn't until the reforms of King Josiah around 620 BC that Asherah worship was violently suppressed. The priests rewrote religious texts, destroyed evidence of goddess worship, and established strict monotheistic orthodoxy. The divine feminine was erased from Judaism, and later from Christianity and Islam. But the archaeological evidence remains, proving that the God of Abraham originally had a wife. Then we have Lilith, one of the most controversial figures in religious mythology. According to Jewish mystical texts, Lilith was Adam's first wife, created equal to him from the same earth. But Lilith refused to be subordinate to Adam. She demanded equality, especially in intimate relations. When Adam insisted on dominance, Lilith spoke the ineffable name of God, gained wings, and flew away from Eden. God sent 3 angels to bring her back, but Lilith refused, she chose freedom over submission. In punishment, she was demonized, transformed from Adam's equal partner into a demon who seduces men and harms children. Medieval Jewish texts describe her as a succubus, a night demon, a child killer. Christianity adopted this demonization, making Lilith a symbol of female rebellion and sexual danger. But here's the deeper story, Lilith represents the suppression of female autonomy. She was literally written out of Genesis, the official biblical narrative skips from Adam's creation directly to Eve, who is made from Adam's rib as a subordinate helpmate. Lilith's story survived only in apocryphal texts like the alphabet of Ben Sira. She represents what patriarchal religion couldn't tolerate, a woman who demands equality and rejects male authority. Modern feminist theology has reclaimed Lilith as a symbol of female empowerment and resistance. But for millennia, she was used as a cautionary tale, this is what happens to women who refuse their place. Let's talk about Sophia, the divine wisdom figure in early Christianity who was nearly erased from orthodoxy. In Gnostic Christianity, Sophia wasn't just a concept, she was a cosmic goddess, the feminine aspect of God. Gnostic texts describe Sophia as the creator of the material world, as wisdom personified, as the divine feminine principle necessary for salvation. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and other Gnostic texts present Sophia as central to Christian theology. Early Christians debated whether the Holy Spirit was feminine, represented by Sophia. The Hebrew word for spirit, ruach, is feminine, the word for wisdom, chokmah, is feminine. Early Christian iconography sometimes depicted the Trinity with Sophia as the third person. But when the Roman Church established orthodoxy at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, Gnostic texts were declared heretical. The divine feminine was systematically removed from Christian theology. Sophia survived only as an abstract concept, not as a goddess. The feminine principle in divinity was suppressed, replaced by an exclusively masculine trinity. Think about what this means. Early Christianity included goddess worship. The suppression of Sophia and Gnostic texts wasn't theological, it was political. The Roman Empire needed a unified, hierarchical, patriarchal religion. The divine feminine was a threat to that structure. We should discuss Mary Magdalene more deeply, because her story is one of the greatest religious cover-ups. The canonical Gospels describe Mary Magdalene as one of Jesus's closest disciples, as the first witness to the resurrection, as the apostle to the apostles. Jesus appeared to her first, entrusted her with the most important message in Christianity, and called her to spread the gospel. But the Gospel of Mary, excluded from the Bible, reveals even more. In this text, Mary Magdalene received secret teachings from Jesus that the male disciples don't understand. Peter becomes jealous and questions why Jesus would reveal things to a woman rather than to them. Mary teaches the other disciples, but they resist her authority. The Gospel of Philip goes further, describing Mary Magdalene as Jesus's companion, using language that suggests a romantic or spiritual partnership. It says Jesus loved her more than the other disciples and would kiss her often. Whether this was romantic, symbolic, or spiritual, the text clearly indicates a special relationship. So what happened? Pope Gregory I in 591 AD declared that Mary Magdalene was a repentant prostitute. With no biblical evidence whatsoever, he combined Mary Magdalene with other women in the Gospels and created a false narrative. For 1,400 years, the Catholic Church taught that Mary Magdalene was a sinful woman saved by Jesus' mercy. It wasn't until 1969 that the Vatican officially acknowledged this was wrong. But the damage was done. Christianity's most important female apostle had been recharacterized as a prostitute. Why? Because a powerful, authoritative female disciple threatened the male-dominated church hierarchy. Better to make her a repentant sinner than acknowledge her as an apostle equal to Peter. Let's explore Inanna and Ereshkigal, two Mesopotamian goddesses whose story is one of the most profound myths ever written. Inanna was the goddess of love, beauty, war, and political power. Ereshkigal was the goddess of the underworld, Inanna's dark sister. The myth of Inanna's descent to the underworld describes Inanna journeying to the land of the dead to attend the funeral rites of Ereshkigal's husband. At each of the 7 gates of the underworld, Inanna must remove a piece of her divine power, her crown, her jewelry, her robes. By the time she reaches Ereshkigal's throne, she's completely stripped of authority and protection. Ereshkigal, in grief and rage, kills Inanna and hangs her corpse on a hook. For 3 days, Inanna is dead. But Enki, god of wisdom, sends rescuers to the underworld. They don't try to overpower Ereshkigal, instead, they show her compassion and empathy. Moved by this, Ereshkigal releases Inanna. But there's a condition: someone must take Inanna's place in the underworld. When Inanna returns to the surface, she finds her husband Dumuzi sitting on her throne, unmoved by her death. In fury, she sends him to the underworld in her place. This myth is incredibly deep. It's about confronting death and the shadow self. Ereshkigal represents everything Inanna isn't: darkness, grief, mortality, rage. Inanna must descend, surrender her power, die, and be reborn to become whole. This is the template for every hero's journey, every shamanic initiation, every death and rebirth myth. And it's significant that this profound spiritual narrative centers two goddesses. Inanna and Ereshkigal aren't just symbols, they're complex characters experiencing transformation. This myth predates Greek, Roman, and biblical mythology, yet it contains more psychological and spiritual depth. We must talk about Isis, the Egyptian goddess whose worship spread across the entire Roman Empire. Isis was the goddess of magic, healing, motherhood, and resurrection. Her mythology describes how she resurrected her murdered husband Osiris, conceived their son Horus through magical means, and protected her child from the god Set. Isis wasn't just a fertility goddess, she was a cosmic power. Temples to Isis existed throughout the Roman world, in Egypt, Greece, Rome, Gaul, Britain. Mystery cults devoted to Isis offered salvation, eternal life, and spiritual transformation. Initiation into the mysteries of Isis involved ritual death and rebirth, similar to Christian baptism. Here's what's fascinating: when Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, many converts came from Isis cults. The iconography of Mary holding baby Jesus is nearly identical to Isis holding baby Horus. The titles given to Mary, Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, were originally titles of Isis. Early Christian art sometimes depicts Mary with Isis's symbols. Some historians argue that Marian theology is essentially a Christianized version of Isis worship. The Divine Mother figure was so central to ancient religion that Christianity had to incorporate it, even though official theology resisted goddess worship. Mary became the acceptable feminine divine, carefully limited to avoid full goddess status. Let's discuss Kali, the Hindu goddess who represents the terrifying aspect of the divine feminine. Kali is depicted with dark skin, wild hair, a necklace of skulls, a skirt of severed arms, holding a severed head and a sword. She dances on the corpse of her husband Shiva, tongue out, eyes wide with fury. Western observers saw Kali and concluded she was an evil demon. But Kali isn't evil, she's the goddess of time, death, and transformation. She destroys ego, illusion, and attachment. Her terrifying appearance represents the dissolution of the false self. Devotees of Kali seek liberation through confronting mortality and surrendering to divine power. Kali's story often describes how she was created to defeat demons that the male gods couldn't overcome. She's more powerful than Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma combined. Yet she chooses to be devoted to Shiva, not as a subordinate but as an equal. Their relationship represents the balance of masculine and feminine divine principles. What's significant is that Hinduism, unlike Abrahamic religions, never suppressed goddess worship. The divine feminine is central, powerful, and necessary. Goddesses aren't diminished, they're cosmic forces equal to or greater than gods. This represents a religious tradition that maintained the sacred feminine. We should explore the Morrigan, the Celtic goddess of war, fate, and sovereignty. The Morrigan appears as three sisters, sometimes as a single goddess, sometimes as a crow. She's associated with battlefields, prophesying death, and deciding the outcome of conflicts. Warriors sought her favor, kings sought her blessing. The Morrigan represents female power that isn't soft or nurturing, she's fierce, autonomous, and terrifying. She chooses who lives and dies. She appears before battles, washing the armor of those fated to die. She's not bound by morality or compassion, she operates according to cosmic law and destiny. When Christianity came to Ireland, the Morrigan was demonized. She became associated with witches and evil magic. Her worship was suppressed, her sacred sites destroyed or converted to churches. The fierce, powerful feminine divine was recharacterized as demonic. This pattern appears everywhere Christianity spread. Autonomous goddesses became demons, saints, or were erased entirely. Let's talk about Freya, the Norse goddess of love, beauty, fertility, war, and magic. Freya was one of the most important deities in Norse mythology, more powerful than many gods. She rode a chariot pulled by cats, wore a cloak of falcon feathers, and possessed the necklace Brisingamen, which granted her immense magical power. Freya was a warrior goddess. Half of those who died in battle went to her hall Folkvang, the other half to Odin's Valhalla. She practiced seer, a form of Norse magic associated with seeing the future and manipulating fate. She taught this magic to Odin himself. But here's what's interesting: as Christianity converted Scandinavia, Freya's worship was condemned. Christian missionaries labeled her a demon of lust and witchcraft. Her association with sexuality and female autonomy made her incompatible with Christian morality. By the Middle Ages, Freya had transformed in Christian interpretation from a powerful goddess to a symbol of sin. The pattern is clear: whenever patriarchal monotheistic religions encounter goddess worship, the goddesses are either erased, diminished, or demonized. The divine feminine is too threatening to male-dominated religious hierarchies. We must discuss Pachamama, the Andean Earth Mother goddess worshipped across South America. Pachamama isn't just Mother Earth, she's a conscious, living deity who provides for humanity and demands respect. Indigenous Andean people perform rituals to honor Pachamama, offering coca leaves, alcohol, and prayers. When Spanish conquistadors brought Christianity to South America, they tried to suppress Pachamama worship. But the indigenous people resisted. They practiced syncretism, blending Pachamama with the Virgin Mary. Catholic priests tolerated this because it facilitated conversion, but Pachamama worship never truly ended. Today, millions of people in Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador worship Pachamama alongside or instead of Catholic figures. She represents the survival of indigenous goddess worship despite centuries of colonial suppression. Her continued worship proves that the divine feminine cannot be completely erased. Let's explore the broader pattern: why were goddesses systematically suppressed? The answer is power. Goddess worship often empowered women in ancient societies. Priestesses held authority, women participated in religious leadership, and feminine qualities were considered sacred. When patriarchal monotheistic religions emerged, they needed to consolidate power in male hands. An exclusively male god served political purposes. It justified male political authority, male religious leadership, and male social dominance. If God is male, then men are closer to the divine. If the priesthood is male, then religious authority is male. If sacred texts are written by men about male prophets, then men control truth itself. The suppression of goddess worship wasn't theological, it was political. It was about power, authority, and social control. Every goddess who was erased represents a loss of female spiritual authority. And here's what's crucial: the divine feminine didn't represent just women, it represented the balance of cosmic forces. Ancient religions understood that reality includes both masculine and feminine principles. Creation requires both. Destruction requires both. Wisdom, power, love, war, all contain both masculine and feminine aspects. By suppressing the divine feminine, monotheistic religions created an imbalanced theology. They elevated masculine qualities, reason, order, authority, hierarchy, and diminished feminine qualities, intuition, chaos, compassion, equality. This theological imbalance has had profound social consequences. Think about it: would Christianity have justified the oppression of women if the Trinity included a divine mother? Would Islam have restricted female participation if Allah had a feminine aspect? Would Judaism have excluded women from rabbinical authority if Asherah had remained as Yahweh's consort? The theological exclusion of the divine feminine enabled the social subordination of women. Modern feminist theology is reclaiming these forgotten goddesses. Scholars are excavating suppressed texts, reinterpreting mythology, and challenging patriarchal religious narratives. The divine feminine is being restored, not as a rejection of masculinity but as a restoration of balance. Some argue that all gods are human projections, that divinity is a construct. If that's true, then the suppression of goddess worship reveals what humans were really suppressing: female power, female sexuality, female autonomy, female spirituality. The gods we create reflect the societies we build. Patriarchal societies create male gods, egalitarian societies honor both masculine and feminine divine principles. Here's the final thought: the forgotten goddesses aren't truly forgotten. They survive in folklore, in witchcraft traditions, in New Age spirituality, in feminist theology, in indigenous religions that resisted colonization. Asherah, Lilith, Sophia, Inanna, Isis, Kali, the Morrigan, Freya, Pachamama, they're all experiencing revival. The suppression of the divine feminine is being reversed. Women are reclaiming their spiritual authority, rewriting religious narratives, and honoring the sacred feminine. Whether you believe these goddesses are literal beings or symbolic archetypes, their restoration represents a profound shift in human consciousness. The forgotten goddesses teach us that the divine is not exclusively masculine, that female power is sacred, that the feminine principle is necessary for spiritual wholeness. They remind us that for most of human history, the divine feminine was honored, worshipped, and feared. Tomorrow we're exploring the heroes history forgot, the legendary figures who shaped civilizations but were erased from mainstream narratives. From forgotten warriors to suppressed revolutionaries, discover the historical heroes who changed the world. Thanks for watching. If this changed your perspective on religious history, hit subscribe. Drop a comment: which forgotten goddess resonates with you most? Check out the rest of our channel for more hidden history.